Welcome to the CalPERS Board Candidate Forum. I'm Paula Lee, a member of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and the moderator for today's forum. A little bit about the League. The League of Women Voters was born almost 100 years ago out of the suffragist movement, which gave women the vote. We are a nonpartisan organization of women and men. Nonpartisan means that the League does not support candidates or political parties. We encourage informed and active participation in government through education and advocacy at the local, state, and national level. Although our nonpartisanship policy does not permit us to endorse political candidates, we are a political organization when it comes to issues. We study all sides of issues and form positions that we use to support or oppose legislation and ballot measures. You may have used our recommendations or our pros and cons publications to help you better understand state and local ballot measures. A few important notes about this year's CalPERS board election. This year, for the first time, you'll be able to vote in one of three ways. Online, by phone, and US mail. Your CalPERS board makes important decisions about your future, your pension, and your health benefits. It's in your interest to know these candidates, their views, and how that relates to your retirement future. Your questions here from the audience must be in writing on the large index cards, and they'll be picked up by League volunteers. Just raise your hand or raise the card. And raise your hand if you need another card. Questions will be reviewed by League members, Roseanne and Bill, and your question may be combined with others to avoid redundancy. Our goal here today is to cover the issues with good questions for the candidates and inform you, the voters. Please direct your question to all the candidates. No questions will go to individual candidates. And all campaign materials can be found outside the auditorium. We also ask that you hold any applause or vocalization until the end of the forum. That's in fairness to all the candidates. And lastly, to avoid an embarrassing moment, you may want to make sure your cell phone is silenced. The format for today's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will make up to a 2-minute opening statement. Next, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. And finally, the candidates will have up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Claudia, in the front row, our League volunteer, is your timer. Candidates, watch her for the 30 seconds to go card so you can finish your thoughts, and she also has a stop sign. Now I would like to introduce the candidates who are running for a seat on the CalPERS board. They are seated in the order that they appear on the ballot. The candidates for position A are Michael Flayerman and David Miller. The candidates for position B are Bruce Jennings. He was not able to be here. Those present are Michael Bilbrey, Margaret Brown, and Wisdom, or Sam, Atawalji. I will be rotating who gets the question first, and you'll all have an opportunity to answer all the questions. As I said, no questions will be directed to you personally. So now we'll begin with an opening statement from Michael Flayerman.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. On behalf of all of the candidates, I'd like to thank you for being here this morning and for taking an interest in the election. So my name is Michael Flayerman, and let me tell you a little bit about myself. I worked in the investment business for well over a decade, and in that role earned billions of dollars of profits for public pension systems all over the world. After doing that, I decided to do something quite different, which is to go into academia first at Harvard, then at UC Berkeley. In that role, I have focused on corruption by investment managers working for pension systems. I've uncovered numerous instances of corruption, which has collectively, over time, will save billions of dollars, even more, for pension systems all over the world. So when you add it up, my contribution to public pension systems everywhere, including CalPERS, I think is quite significant. This comes on top of a career that I had earlier in my life where I was a member of the CalPERS board for 8 years. So I've had that experience as well. And finally, I'd like to note that I have quite significant experience working in healthcare. During my investment career, I was on the board of 2 large healthcare companies, one of which is a pharmacy benefit manager, the other of which is a pharmaceutical company that makes a life-saving product that has saved literally thousands of lives of newborn babies, a product so significant that the discovery of it won the Nobel Prize in medicine. Thank you very much.
David Miller.
Good morning. First, let me say thank you to the CalPERS and the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and thank all of you for being here today. CalPERS elections are important, and the more attention that is brought to them, the better. Also, I want to thank Treasurer John Chung, Controller Betty Yee, and the dozens of organizations representing retirees and active employees who have endorsed my candidacy. My name is David Miller. I'm running for the CalPERS board because I'm tired of the endless attacks on CalPERS, on defined benefit pensions, and on the public employees who work so hard to earn them. This system and the CalPERS members who count on it for retirement security are worth fighting for. When elected to the board, I want to be that leader who pushes CalPERS and its board members and staff to fight back, to speak up in support of defined benefit pensions as the best system for public employees, to push back against the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and Chuck Reeds who have been constantly trying to undermine our system for political purposes, and to take on the pension haters who push privatization schemes like high-cost, risky 401ks that enrich Wall Street but don't provide retirement security. Fighting to protect CalPERS and its members is exactly what I've done for the last 25 years or more as a union member, union leader, and a founder of Californians for Retirement Security, the coalition formed in 2005 to fight back against the attacks on public employees and our pensions. I was on the front lines opposing Governor Wilson's raids on CalPERS. I strongly supported and backed Prop 162 and have spoken out repeatedly in the media against the countless anti-pension ballot proposals we've faced. So my commitment is very simple. I will continue to fight to defend our defined benefit pensions, fight for high quality, affordable health care, fight for affordable prescription drugs, and restore integrity, transparency, and the members' voice to the board. I'll always put the interests of CalPERS members first.
And candidates for position B, Michael Bilbray.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Michael Bilbray, and I am a 27-year member of CalPERS. I started my career at Citrus Community College when I was 18 years old and have continued to work there and enjoy the work that I do each and every day to this day still. Over 27 years now, actually almost 33 years, working with students and our community. I've served on the board since 2011 when I was elected to fulfill a term that was vacated. So I had 2 years on that term and then was reelected for a full 4-year term that I'm ending now. So I've been on the board for 6 actually short years. While it seems long, once you are in a position and go through all the trials and tribulations that we have been through over the last 6 years, it goes by much faster than you think. I'm running for another term to continue many of the successes we have seen over the last 6 years. Now, don't get me wrong. We've had many trials and tribulations, as I mentioned. But there have been many successful initiatives, and I want to see them through. The most important and most paramount 2 key components of what we do as a board member, and I hear this every single day from board members of CalPERS, is to make sure that, one, our investments, and that we are achieving full funding, and to make sure that the benefits are provided of our defined benefit plan for their lifetime. In addition, they want to also have us push for more aggressive healthcare rates and plan designs that are much more effective to their daily lives and to their well-being. I want to continue this over the next term because I think there are many initiatives we need to move forward with that I'm sure we'll get questions on and we'll discuss more during this time. I'll continue to focus on my duty to be sure that the funding is there, that the fund gets back to full funding in a more aggressive time frame than what we've always done, and that we're able to pay the contributions that are promised to each and every one of our CalPERS members through their years of service and their commitment. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
Good morning. My name is Margaret Brown, and I'm a 26-year member working for public school districts throughout California. I want to start out by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and I also want to say thank you to all the members of CalPERS, active and retired, who have contacted me via phone, email, on Facebook, and in person to tell me that they either support me and have voted for me, or to ask me specific questions about where I stand on the issues. And more importantly, I've had a number of contacts about specific issues they're facing with CalPERS, specifically with the staff, and some of them have been quite serious. Regardless of the issue, there is one common thread in these conversations, and that is they never hear back. They turn in their paperwork, they do it all perfectly, it's notarized, it's got the court stamp on it, but they never hear back. They wait for months and months, and our members are expected to just wait. I share that same experience. I had an issue, I filled out my forms, and I could not reach anyone at CalPERS. I sent emails, I made phone calls, and I received form letters. And I thought, how could this be? This can't be right. And so, of course, I started researching. I Googled, I talked to people, and found out a lot of people were having issues. But more importantly, I discovered, and I was shocked to learn, of all the problems facing CalPERS. The largest one being that we were underfunded and investment returns were dismal. After viewing years of board meetings online, I started attending them to see in person what was going on. And that's when I met Mr. Jelensek, Mr. Flairman, members of the retirees, and that's when I decided to run. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sam Altawaji, and I'm running for CalPERS Board of Administration, Position B. I'm honored to have the opportunity to run for this position and represent the interests of all active and retirees in the CalPERS system. I'm a registered civil engineer in California with Master and Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering. I spent over 29 years working for the cities of Tustin and Redondo Beach. Last position, I was city engineer in Redondo Beach. As a recent retiree, I'm proud to be a member of CalPERS system. During my government services, I was responsible for multi-million-dollar budgets and projects. I served on the Medical Insurance Evaluation Selection Committee and several other public committees, and I was on the Planning Commission for the City of Tustin for over 3 years. I also served as a board member and vice chair for the Tustin Municipal Employee Association for several years before I was promoted into management. I'm running for CalPERS board to ensure our defined benefits are protected. I will work to stabilize the cost of medical insurance and the employee-employer contribution rate to the retirement fund. I will push to improve the customer service to all CalPERS members and streamline the retirement process. challenging any false or misleading political statement about our pension and benefit plan and enhancing the transparency of the board are some of my immediate priority when I'm on the board. I look forward to this discussion and appreciate the opportunity to display my ability to serve on the CalPERS Board of Administration. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Okay, we'll begin with the questions, and the first question to Michael Flayerman. What are the issues of greatest importance to CalPERS, and what actions would you take to address them?
The biggest issue is clearly the issue of funding and whether there will be enough money in the pot at CalPERS over coming decades to pay all of the pension promises. The role of the CalPERS board, and especially the role of the individuals who are elected from the members, is to advocate fiercely to make sure that those promises are met. So that is the overriding issue. That is the overriding goal that I think anybody who wants to represent the membership needs to embrace. I think that there are reasons to be concerned about whether the organization is on the right track right now with respect to that, in that the organization, I think, has become very over-reliant on Wall Street and on products that Wall Street sells as a way of having hope for meeting its return. I think that the system needs to move more toward making a bet on the growth of the world economy and less on a bet on products as a way of meeting its long-term obligations. The other key issue is the issue of, I think, transparency and governance within the board, which I look forward to talking about further as this debate goes on.
David Miller.
Thank you. CalPERS is under attack. Public employees are under attack. It's a concerted, politically driven effort to attack us on unfair grounds. We need to fight back to maintain the position that defined benefit pensions, access to quality health care for active and retired employees is critical to public service and our economy. That's the attack we're under. What contributes to that is CalPERS positions and performance on investments, our positions and performance when it comes to negotiating for access to quality health care and maintaining the costs at a level that are affordable to our members and aren't as burdensome to our employers, controlling those costs, maximizing our investment performance, not readjusting our performance expectations lower. Those are the things that impact us, both in terms of the security of our retirements and even at collective bargaining and in our workplaces. So restoring transparency, accountability, and performance at CalPERS is what I will be focused on as a CalPERS board member.
Michael Bilbrey.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned in my opening, what I hear the members say each and every day is about investments and healthcare. Mostly, starting with investments, our members worry, well, I have my retirement for the lifetime that is expected. Will I have my retirement when it's my time, such as myself, in 10, maybe 12 years when I retire, and those who are receiving retirement now? We need to get back to full funding. We were there once before. We have put processes in place, started to do risk mitigation policy, et cetera, and getting back to full funding, but that is about now probably a 25-year process. I think we can do, as we're now starting the process with ALM, I think we can be more aggressive and look more at a 10-year process, or maybe even 5, and to get us back to where we need to be, where members are feeling more comfortable and not as concerned about their fund. In the area of healthcare, of course, rates are always a very, very big concern. But the bigger part of pushing part of those rates is the regions. It's a huge, very difficult situation going on between the rates in the north and in the south. It's an issue that this re-elected, I want us to make sure we get on the table and take care of, because there needs to be more parity between the north and south and evening of the rates between the regions. It's really the north pays so much more than the south, and I think we can get to more parity. Thank you.
Margaret Brown?
Thank you. It's our job to advocate for the members. And there is a lot of expertise about the complexities of retirement issues that reside with the retirees. And we should talk to them, and we should give them opportunities to address the board, not cut them off after 3 minutes on some very complex issues. The number one issues, of course, facing the pension fund is funding to keep our defined benefit plan. We have been underperforming for years, and I agree with Mr. Flairman that we are relying too much on Wall Street, and we need to look at the world economy. That's where the growth is coming from, and we need to adjust how we invest. But currently, the board has no say-so. They've delegated all their authority to staff. So it doesn't matter if I get on the board what I say, because I'm just supposed to nod and go along with what staff says, and that will change with me. We need more oversight and transparency. When the board makes votes in secret and we find out about it months later, it impacted our returns. We're glowing about 11.2%. Strs beat us. Everybody beat us. People in Vanguard beat us. We need to do a better job. It starts with listening to the members, oversight, and transparency. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji?
Yeah, the most important thing for the CalPERS is the investment and the discount rate that they use. So it's been adjusted a couple times, and the rate of return on investment is the most important things. And I will work with staff, with everybody from outside in the private sector and so forth, to find the best balance. And everything comes with risk. You have to balance the risk with the reward. But the main important thing is to make it stable for the duration of the employment and retirement, and keep the retirement going forever. The other important thing is the medical cost, medical insurance cost. And I was a member of a committee that dealt with insurance companies and trying to reduce rate and trying to find a way and open it to more insurance companies. It will also help. But you have to balance it. You have to make it sure. You have to be clear about it. Another important part of CalPERS, there are a lot of misleading statements, and we have to be active in fighting these statements, not just let it go and the media will take it and, oh, the system is going to be bankrupt or cannot pay, or all of that. The system is good, over $300 billion investment, but we need to do our job to improve it and be responsive to the members. Thank you.
This question to David Miller. Do you oppose or support statewide ballot measures like San Jose Mayor Reed's idea that would require voter approval of pension changes at the local level? And what do you see as CalPERS' role in supporting or opposing such measures?
I adamantly oppose such measures, whether they come from Chuck Reed or any of the other anti-public employee, anti-pension enemies of public employees in our retirement system out there. Our system manages our hard-earned retirement funds. Our system needs to be in the hands of our representatives and needs to be managed by CalPERS. And for the local governments who have worked with CalPERS, CalPERS needs to step up and defend the members of those groups as well as public employees who deserve to have their hard-earned funds for their hard-earned retirement protected by a system that is focused on their interests first. And that's what I'm all about, is putting CalPERS members' interests first. Thank you.
Michael Bilbrey.
Thank you. So we have seen these statewide ballot measures come time and time again for many years, and each and every time we have been successful in pushing them off, and they end up going down the road. I hope at some point that we're able to push them down the road permanently, and that we not have to go through this every so many years, whether it be 2, 4, et cetera. But each time we've seen them come forward, it has always had flaws in the way they are written because they don't understand how the system works. When we talk about San Jose saw, after they did their measures, a huge decline in not only their employment, but actually the economy of their own city. And later took measures to reverse what they had put in place because it wasn't working. Just like every measure that comes forward will not work for us. CalPERS needs to be involved with accurate information because so often the information that comes out in these ballot initiatives are absolutely false and inaccurate. And we also need to be advocating for the members and for the plan and the system itself during these ballot initiatives. And yes, I oppose these type of ballots. A defined benefit pension plan is what we have and what we need to continue to have and not change to any other type of plan such as hybrid or defined contribution. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
Thank you. Of course, I believe everybody on this panel opposes such a measure. We've worked hard. I have 26 years in. I think probably between all of us sitting here, we probably have 150 years on the panel. Sorry, I don't know how old all of you are. We oppose such measures. But why the attacks now? Why now? It's because our investments are underperforming. It's because we're upset about the lack of health care choices, or we're upset about what's going on with our prescription, Optum Rx. There are a number of issues, and when we are upset and CalPERS is not doing a good job, we talk, it gets out there in the press, and then opens the opportunity for attacks. We can stop those attacks by doing a better job. When the board meets and they change the asset allocation, which means they have to reduce the amount of what we're going to earn from 7.5% to 7%, and now all the cities and the school districts and the state has to kick in more. When those things are done in secret and nobody knows it's coming, it hurts us and it opens us up to these attacks. The board needs to make better investments. We need to be open and transparent about the decisions we make and look at the complexities of those decisions. There are big consequences, and we need to figure that out fast. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Thank you. Yeah, I also oppose that measure and bring the voting to the local. If local agencies, and I work for a local agency, if they want to do something different, they could have done it on their own. Many agencies have done it on their own. In the 2000, they lost about 70% of their investment, and they went back and joined PERS. PERS was doing good, but it had a couple dips, and that's expected in investment. You can improve on it. You can also take advantage of these dips, and like in the 2008, 2009, the real estate market went down so much, could have increased the investment in real estate, and now it's back. I mean, in Southern California, almost back to the original number of investment in real estate, and the investment is doing well and recovered their cost. Thank you.
Michael Flowery.
Flaherman.
Flaherman.
I was actually born with the name Flaherty,
That's right.
but that's a different story. Clearly, we all agree you can't represent the members without saying that you are opposed to these kinds of anti-pension measures, and you can't even really substantively. You have to be substantively opposed to them also. But the question is, though, it's not enough to just to just vote and say we're opposed. You need to engage in effective advocacy, and that has been missing from CalPERS and missing from the board in recent years. And I can tell you a very quick anecdote to illustrate that. There was a bill in the legislature last year, AB 2833, that related to transparency of investments. I wrote the first draft of it. I got a call at one point from a legislative staffer saying, CalPERS staff is in here trying to weaken the bill. I came and I sat right there and said to the board, I hear your staff is trying to weaken the bill. And one of the members of the board, a representative of the treasurer, said, oh, no, that's completely false. And nobody on the board even asked me, well, what do you mean? Or nobody asked the staff, is that true? Lo and behold, a month later, the bill had been weakened. So if the board can't even control its staff to take positions that are adverse to the interests of the members, I think there's something seriously wrong. The board needs to do much better.
Okay, I remind the audience that some of the questions coming in are to individual candidates, and we are not asking questions of individual candidates. All the candidates will answer, if they want to, all the questions. So just direct your questions to all the candidates. And this one we begin with Michael Bilbrey. Some investments that could help CalPERS meet its financial objectives are controversial, such as investments in the tobacco and coal industries. If elected, what investments would you advocate should not be in the CalPERS portfolio, even if their past returns have been generous? And what criteria would you use to decide that?
Thank you. So for me, it's all about the opportunities of all investments that come our way. There are opportunities in every type of an investment, but we need to review those, analyze those, and make sure that the risks that are involved with them are not going to harm the fund. So there's a wide variety of opportunities that I think we haven't taken that we could. I would not advocate for not going into investment unless if it was going to do some sort of harm to the fund, if it fell within our risk mitigation policy and was clear about what was going to happen in the area of tobacco, which we took up this past year. With all the information that was provided to us from economists, academics, our board consultants, et cetera, it clearly looked over the long term that was going to be an issue with our investments and a risk. And clearly it was really clear to me and to other board members that that is not something we wanted to get back into or continue with. Again, I want us to look at every opportunity that's available to us, to review it according to when we have policy that surrounds this, and watch it within our policy to make sure we're making sure these investments are not too risky, that they fall within our risk appetite, and that we are doing investments that will get the fund back to where we need it to be. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
I'm really surprised by that answer from Mr. Bilbrey, because his last 6 years on the board, he has consistently voted to divest, consistently approve the, I'll call it, social justice investing. Our job, our fiduciary role on the board is to ensure the pension fund is there for us now and in the future. Tobacco, I actually sat here at a board meeting and your consultant that you paid said tobacco has been the best performing stock over the 20-year history. He put this big graph up and it showed it. Here's our pension fund, here's tobacco. You know, I'm a non-smoker, my whole family's non-smokers, that's not the issue. Our job is to invest the money and make the returns for the fund. Yes, we should focus on any legal issues and weigh the risks, but by golly, I know just about everybody's making money in tobacco except for us. And it's more than that. It's firearms. It could be coal, it could be oil. We need to look at what's going to make the fund the money. This is how we stop the attacks. We make the money, we get our pension fund back up to where it needs to be, and we'll solve the problem of the attacks. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Right. I agree with Ms. Brown's statement. We are if we are on the board, we are elected to maintain the fund, maintain it for retiree, maintain it for the cities, reduce the discount rate, improve the rate of return. And any investment that comes our way that would have that potential, we will look at it, we will weigh the risk against the reward, and we will do whatever it will take to improve the funding status. And there are some politically correct or incorrect. This is something that our duty is the fund, and keep the fund solvent, and keep the fund running to pay for retirees and everybody for years. And this would be our job, and this is what I will do. Thank you.
Michael Flaherman.
Yeah, there is an issue here, because if you pumped every barrel of proven and probable oil reserves that is on the books of every oil company, the coastlines of every continent of the world would be under 50 feet of water. That is a real issue. That is a financial issue that affects the CalPERS portfolio. But I'll tell you what I worry about, which is I come to the investment committee meetings and I sit out there, and to some extent, it's only a slight exaggeration to say that's all I hear talked about here. I don't even know why, in some ways, it's called an investment committee meeting, because I worked in the investment business and went to an investment committee meeting and was part of the investment committee every Monday. And you know, an investment committee meeting is a discussion of the portfolio, the risks, the opportunities, investments under review as potential new investments. There's none of that here. None. Something is really wrong.
David Miller.
You know, this is a very tough and very well thought out question that we could go on for many hours. But the bottom line is, this system exists to provide retirement benefits and healthcare benefits. And so it needs to be well funded. It ultimately needs to recover and be funded sufficiently to be actuarially sound. When there are decisions about investments and the portfolio and the mix and the risk-return relationships and everything, there is never one single investment that is a must-have investment. There are always choices to be made. And our choices need to reflect the overall benefits and the risks and what our members' values are. And so any investment should not be considered. The law prohibits us from investing in a lot of things for good reason. We don't support investments that help the enemies of our country. We don't support investments that abuse the rights of workers, that destroy the environment in illegal ways. We also need to look at what is legal for us to invest in, what is right for us to invest in, what makes sense. Given choices, investments that help the California economy, help California workers, investments that aren't geared toward privatizing public sector work, public safety work, those are things that when given choices, you lean toward the investments that make sense for our members' values and for their welfare in the long run and their benefit, and that don't impact other investments adversely.
Thank you. This one for Margaret Brown, and it's been reported that some in the online audience cannot hear all of you adequately, so make sure, I know you want to be heard, that you are speaking directly into the mic. And this one we begin with Margaret Brown on the same area, in the same area. What is your view of financial risk to the fund due to climate change? If you believe there is such a risk, how can the board mitigate that risk?
Thank you. I will say that voice projection has not ever been a problem of mine, so that must not be directed at me. In terms of climate risk, I think we do evaluate that. We have staff that do that, but more importantly, the companies themselves are looking at that risk. If they're actually if they're actually producing something that is a problem, then it's a problem, and then the stock market will fall, the price will fall, and then people don't invest. I think there are some issues with the climate, but honestly, we need to take a look at those and determine what our risk appetite is. But again, the primary goal is to grow the fund, to make sure that we go from 68% today to whatever it is, 72, 78. I don't actually know what I know the goal is 100. I think we're safe at, 85, 90%, but we need to grow the fund. So we do need to reevaluate that risk appetite, and I think we've been too risk adverse. And that's why we didn't make the returns this year that our sister across the street, CalPERS, did. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Yeah, it's similar to the last question. I mean, any investment that makes sense, we will look at it. If it's affecting the environment and there is something illegal about it, of course we are not going to volunteer in it and do any risk associated with it. If there is a calculated risk, maybe you invest a small amount. You have a lot of money into the system, and you can do a small fraction of investment into something and try it and all of that. The bottom line is the rate of return for the fund. It's our duty is to maintain the fund, to grow the fund, to make it better. I remember the days when the fund was super funded, and the formulas changed and all of that, and now in a different story. The economy goes into cycle. This is going to happen, and eventually you either make the best out of it or do based on the investment, based on the risk you take, based on the evaluation. You evaluate everything you do and move on. Thank you.
Michael Flaherman.
Yeah, as I said before, if every barrel of proven and probable reserve, meaning oil that we know is in the ground, that is controlled by oil companies, is pumped, the world will be underwater at the coastline. So there's a real issue there, and it needs to be very, very carefully thought through. But here's a problem, which is that part of monitoring risk involves both the board and the public being able to see what's going on at CalPERS, and there are real problems in this regard. So for example, there's a provision of law that says that CalPERS has to report to the board every month all of the transactions, all the buys and sells of securities in the portfolio. A few years ago, the CalPERS staff decided to simply reinterpret that provision of law so that all they tell the board every month is we bought, $73 million and sold $42 million of securities this month. There's no longer any enumeration of what happened. And as a result of that, people who are trying to monitor the risk in the portfolio, whether it's climate risk or financial risk, have no idea in some respects what the system is doing in terms of, is it buying shares in ExxonMobil or selling shares in ExxonMobil? Don't you want to know that? Isn't that something that the public deserves to know? Isn't that something that the board deserves to know? How did this happen? There's a provision of law that says it's supposed to happen, and it's not.
David Miller.
I'm a professional scientist. Specifically, I'm a biochemist who serves as an environmental scientist. Global climate change is a reality. It has a huge impact on investment risk in the long run. It has impacts on stability of our economic system worldwide. It has impacts on our social systems worldwide. It will be a driver for lots of things and behaviors that will impact our long-term investments, and being pushed because of political reasons to ignore that reality is a huge risk for us and our investment portfolios. The recent discussions about, coal is taking a jump up, we should have been in coal, we should be back in coal. Short-term blip, folks. Coal is not a long-term strategic investment for us here in this country. We need to be moving away from that type of thing. And those are the kind of decisions that we need to make based on facts and empirical evidence and really looking at what will the impacts of people moving all over the world and dealing with the changes that come with global climate change in the way they impact our markets, our investments, infrastructure, political systems, et cetera.
Michael Bilbrey.
Thank you. So, climate risk is obviously a very important risk. There's no denying it, although our members have very strong feelings on both sides of the issue. I have heard that more and more since this campaign has started. Some very much are aware and believe and feel very strongly about us being involved in climate risk. Others want us very much so to be involved in climate, in ESG issues, and to be more proactive. So it's really, from what I see, a mixed bag from the feelings of our members. But there's clearly, and I think we have a candidate who clearly sees and understands part of what his everyday job is, that there are issues revolving the climate and other issues that we deal with every day. Yes, we need to grow the fund, but we do need to evaluate this risk, and this risk is more long-term. So this means we're going to have to stay on top of evaluating this risk over a longer period of time than maybe some of our other investments. But we should look at every opportunity, like I said before, and make sure that our risk appetite is being followed. Thank you.
Okay, next question for Sam Altawaji. This morning's Bee reports that some of you are heavily backed by unions and others are not. Why should those who will vote in this election either prefer a candidate that is backed by a union or one who is not?
I was part of the new union. I was on the board for years. I promoted to management. I see both sides. I think we represent union for regular employees in the cities that I work for, and management are not represented by union. So we have to represent everybody, and you really have to be fair and impartial and look at both sides. It's a team effort. I mean, the contribution rate to fund the CalPERS investment, it comes from both the employer and employee. It used to be coming all from employer, but now it's coming from both sides. And you have to look at the agency and their financial situation and the members and whether they are in union or not, and you look at the best possible scenario and focus on the investment, focus on reducing the risk, and focus on increasing the rate of return. Thank you.
Michael Flayerman.
I was a union member during my period of active employment as a CalPERS member, and I valued that greatly. The challenge of the union's role in making endorsements in these races is that, and I know this from my time previously on the board as well, is that there's a large component of just kind of personal loyalty and personal relationships that is a driver of who gets endorsed. And it's not really clear how that aligns with the interests of the members or the mission of CalPERS. And we've seen on the board of CalPERS how an excessive focus on personal relationships and personal loyalty has been extremely dysfunctional. And what I'm thinking of in particular is that one member of the board, Mr. Jelensik, was censured earlier this year for reasons that were never disclosed and seemed to outside observers to be entirely lacking in merit. And yet, amazingly, no one from the board said anything, you know, and it seemed like the social relationship within members of the board overrode it, and there was the desire to do the right thing, and that because Mr. Jelensik was not popular, therefore he was beat up on. And so this institution is not a popularity contest.
David Miller.
Well, as any of you have been following CalPERS elections for a few cycles know, I have run before with union support. I'm proud to be supported by the organizations that represent the members, whose primary reason to exist is to represent the members' interests and protect them. I couldn't be more proud to have the endorsement of virtually all of the unions that represent members in CalPERS. I'm proud of the support I have from retirees, but I'm running on my own merit. I have run on my own merit from the beginning. I'm not controlled by any given organization. The fact that the entire labor community, and this is pretty unprecedented, has come together and said, we're choosing someone who has labor values, labor priorities, the members first as their priority, over someone who comes from the financial services industry, from Wall Street for the last 10 or 15 years, who left public service, and more power to him, went out and was very successful and made a lot of money. But that's not where I come from, and the unions are the folks who represent CalPERS members, and I'm proud to have their endorsement and support.
Michael Bilbrey.
Thank you. So it's no secret that I also am a union member and have been for all of my working career. I was involved with the California School Employees Association for over 25 years and actually served as their state president of over 230,000 school employees across the state. And I'm quite proud of that and have no problem making sure that people understand and know that. Because it's working people. That's the people we represent, not only in the union, but that's what we represent in CalPERS. We're making sure those members who work their entire lives, their entire careers, have been made promises, and that those promises are kept. And that's both being kept by CalPERS as a board member and also by the union. It's twofold in making sure that our members are made whole and continue through their adult working active career and then into their retirement. So I think there's a correlation. Yes, I have many who do support me, but it's by my own volition of my leadership that I have shown over these 25 years in working relationships with them. Not because of personal loyalty, but because they have seen the work that I have done. They've seen how I have been responsive. They have seen my interactions and the work that our shared values bring together and make a common goal for both of us. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
Thank you. So in 1988, I got my start at Santa Ana Unified. I was an accounts payable clerk, and I was a member of the union. But as I got more education, got more experience, and my responsibilities grew, I was able to promote to management. And then, of course, you can no longer be an active member of the union. However, it doesn't stop you from working every day to improve the working conditions for union members. And that's what I do. Every day in my job, I work to improve the working conditions for teachers and classified employees. But I also want to talk about the real answer to this question, which is, what's the influence? And the answer is, if you're not backed by the unions, you get independence. You get independence from me. I don't have to do what the union tells me. I get to speak up if I don't like something. I get to say what's on my mind and on your mind because you're going to tell me, because I will listen to you. I get to do what's best for all members, not just union members. Thank you.
Okay, this question for Michael Flayerman. What knowledge do you have of blockchain technology, which is the basis for Bitcoin or similar currencies? And would this be relevant to CalPERS?
I do have some knowledge of it. My daughter's boyfriend works for a Bitcoin exchange, so I've had a chance to get some pretty extensive tutorials from him. The idea behind blockchain is that it allows people to engage in electronic transactions anonymously. There are great dangers of abuse for that. A lot of drug trade occurs that way. so that's the sort of dark side of it. The bright side of it is that there are a lot of areas of financial services around making and settling trades that can be very powerfully, positively impacted by incorporating blockchain technology. This is a big wave that is going through the securities industry, and I don't know what specific things CalPERS is doing to get on that wave, but I'm sure that they will have to in coming years, because it will be necessary, because the securities industry will move very strongly in that direction.
David Miller?
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert in the technologies and the underpinnings of the technology on blockchain and Bitcoin, the most obvious and visible representation of that. But the importance of it to CalPERS is there's already competitors of Bitcoin coming up. This whole idea that you can have financial transactions ranging from small to very large that are not just covert, but that are darn near impossible for institutions and governments to really get under the hood and address, whether they be for benign transactions or whether they're for criminal enterprise, or that intersection between benign and criminal, where there's real potential for a lot of growth, especially in a global economy. Way back in the 80s, when I was doing graduate work to get my MBA, there was a lot of interesting work being done back then on arbitrage, because currencies were so different from place to place. And the computer technology changed that whole game overnight, because you couldn't make money on the difference between the time zones in here and France. These are the technologies that will make a difference. When huge economies, again, back then, looking at the economy of the country in India, where huge segments of the entire economy were off the radar and underground, it can have real impacts on the global financial system as this kind of thing becomes more prevalent.
Michael Bilbrey?
So this type of question is where the transparency and honesty comes into true fashion. While I have heard of both of these, I do not have an extensive knowledge and don't feel that I should actually respond to you and try to make something up along the way. I do not have extensive knowledge of this, and so I will not be responding any further to the question.
Margaret Brown?
Well, I guess I'm old, and because I am not invested in Bitcoin. I was going to pull up my little fund here and see if I am. I doubt that my 403B with Transamerica or MetLife is in Bitcoin either. Maybe my Vanguard fund is, but I seriously doubt it. Again, we would, if we're asked, staff brings that investment forward, we would weigh the risk, and we would make a determination if we wanted to invest in Bitcoin or any other type of transaction like this. I do have worries about the covert nature and the abuses of Bitcoin, because again, I'm here talking to you about oversight and transparency. But I've also talked about we're going to make the most money for the fund. So everything is on the table until we see that the risk will pull it off the table. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji?
My information on Bitcoin is limited, like everybody else. I've read a few articles here and there about it, and it's becoming like a big thing. Investors are pushing it and so forth. The bottom line is, again, we are investing for the retirees and the active employees for the long run. And any investment that comes with risk and rewards, and we evaluate it and we make the best out of it. If it makes sense, we read the analysis, read the reviews, the pros and cons, and we make the decision based on what the risk and what's the reward. And if it makes sense. Maybe we invest a very small portion and test it, and sometimes that's also you miss the boat, but it's better than lose big time on it. Our job is to grow the fund. That's the main thing. That's what we will do. This is what we are elected to do, and that's what we will focus on. Thank you.
And David Miller. What are your qualifications to administer the CalPERS retiree health care program, and what would you do to improve the CalPERS health plans?
Yes, in terms of health plans, my background, I've got a technical educational background. I'm a biochemist.
David, can I interrupt you just to say, could you just lower your mic a little bit? I think you could be heard a little better. There you go.
Yeah, I'm a professional scientist. My background is in biochemistry, biophysics as an undergrad, and I have worked in healthcare industry for several years, both in the clinical research side and also earlier in my life as a paramedic. And I understand healthcare. I've always stayed in touch with healthcare throughout my career in government as a government regulator. I serve on the American Healthcare Association and National Center for Assisted Living's program that does assessments and quality assessments and audits of facilities. I'm a master examiner for their National Quality Award program. I'm also an examiner for the California Awards for Performance Excellence. And that has really allowed me to stay in touch with healthcare and actually engage with the high-performing organizations in healthcare throughout California and the nation. And I also have an educational background in business administration, so I understand getting under the hood with organizations and understanding their cost structures, understanding the impacts on the Affordable Care Act and the threats to those impacts when it comes to access and affordability and quality of care and delivery of health services. And so coming to the CalPERS board, I bring that experience, I bring that knowledge, and I bring the dedication to fight for affordable, accessible, quality health care for our active and retired members.
Michael Bilbrey?
Could I have you repeat the question for me, please?
Sure. What are your qualifications to administer the CalPERS retiree health care program, and what would you do to improve the CalPERS health plans?
All right, thank you very much. So my now 6 years on the board, serving in the Pension and Health Benefits Committee, and actually currently serving as a vice chair of that committee, have had many opportunities for professional growth and continued education. I believe strongly that education is lifelong learning. We never finish learning something new. We never finish expanding our minds over our lifetime. In healthcare, as I mentioned before about the regional rates being one of the biggest issues, we also have some very big issues with OptumRx and the pharmacy benefit manager. We had a benefit manager before them who had many service issues. We heard from, especially from our retirees, but we also heard from active members about the quality of service from that previous benefit manager. Then we thought we found something that would work. I think we all sort of had that idea going in. But now we've had many, many bumps in the road. In fact, it's been quite rocky. And so we continue to hear from our members that there are still problems. In particular, lately, more on the formularies is what I'm hearing from more and more. And that is definitely an issue we have to take care of. And if that means we have to enforce our contract or parts of our contract to make sure Optum is performing at the level we expect, that's what we need to do. And in the end, we may end up having to think of other options down the road. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
Thank you. My qualifications include many years serving on our Healthcare Benefits Committee. If you've ever done that, anybody do that? Serve on your benefits committee for your employer, right? For your school district, and I've done that in a number of positions. It's very interesting to see the process because you do RFPs, they come in, you look at the plan, and it all sounds wonderful and glowing. You write the contract, you sign the contract, and then the services just aren't there. They don't have the people on the phone, or the pharmacy doesn't provide the services. In this case, what happened with CalPERS is you switch to Optum Rx, and the formulary is terrible. The copays are higher, or some of the drugs aren't even covered anymore. How did they not know this before they picked them? How did they not know this? Because someone isn't watching. Someone is not doing...
Margaret?
I'm sorry?
You do have great voice projection,
Oh, my
but your
goodness.
mic is not on.
Oh. Do I get my time again? Can I start again?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I apologize for my mic not being on. Everybody in the audience heard me. But the answer is really, I have served on a healthcare benefits committee and seen the process, worked the process, and worked to actually improve the benefits our members receive. The issue really this time around is with Optum Rx and access. Maybe what we need to do is go back to CVS. Maybe that's what we need to do, because while there were issues, it's nothing like it is now. So I'm hoping that CalPERS actually takes action, just doesn't sit back and say, let's wait and see, but they actually take action and maybe terminate them and move on to a company that will serve the members better. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji?
Yeah. I was part of the employee association. We had our own insurance covered through the city without any PERS or anything, and I pushed during that time to join the CalPERS insurance, health insurance. It was probably, at the time, we were paying about $600-700 a month per person, and it dropped about $200 when we joined CalPERS. About 8 or 10 years ago or so, I was on a health committee to evaluate whether we get out of PERS before they did the regional rates, because the rate was also going up, and we were able to get a lower rate from individual brokers and so forth. And I was against that. I said, this is a teaser rate. This is something that you're going to sign up with them, get out of PERS, you cannot go back to PERS, and you lose in the long run. So I was able to keep it into the PERS, and then a year later they came up with the different rates. We have to evaluate the copay, we have to evaluate the monthly, and we have to balance between the copay and the monthly. And PERS experimented with having only 2 or 3 individual, but went to multiple, and they are doing all they can do. So I'll evaluate, I'll read the analysis, I'll vote based on the merit of each situation, and the PPO is probably the lowest in California for the CalPERS PPO, healthcare and PERS care and PERS choice. Thank you.
Michael Flayerman?
When the two major retiree groups, California State Retirees and RPEA, both endorsed me, part of what they said to me at the time was, we think you're exceptionally well qualified to grapple with the healthcare issues that are so important to our members. You were on the board before, you were on the board during a period when we saw a number of years where health plan rates actually declined year over year. You then worked in the business world. You were on the board of a pharmacy benefit manager, a pretty good sized pharmacy benefit manager that was a NASDAQ traded company. You were on the board of a pharmaceutical company and were negotiating with pharmacy benefit management companies and hospitals for the rate that they would pay to buy the drug that you sold. So those are some of my qualifications that I think the retiree groups recognized. Another qualification I like to point to, and I am serious about this, which is that my wife is a pediatrician. She runs the newborn nursery at UCSF. I've had the experience of learning a lot about medicine from her. In terms of my specific agenda, to me the most important thing that needs to change, I think, is that there's this disconnect now where a big part of the savings that they're trying to achieve is by reducing service and doing it in kind of hidden ways, so that retirees end up with a message of, either you're going to save money or you're going to die.
Okay, next question on the same issue, David Miller. What would you do to improve the long-term care program?
Boy, there is a program that needs some improving. The challenge has been, it's been almost like bait and switch. We have gotten people, recruited them into a program with unreasonable expectations, got them in there and then said, oops, we didn't get it right. It's going to cost you a whole lot more money. Over and over and over. We dropped the whole program for years, brought it back. We're trying to put the paddles to it and resuscitate it, trying to get enough participation to get favorable enough rates that we don't have to keep saying oops and raising the premiums and not taking care of the members who, staked their financial resources on that protection. Long-term care is something we all should have. Long-term care insurance as a benefit. CalPERS needs to really almost hit the reset button and sit down and reestablish some credibility and trust and design a program that is affordable and credible enough to get participation up to levels where they can use that huge market power they have. I travel looking at long-term care facilities from top to bottom, from a performance management perspective. This is an industry that is growing, it's critical, it's huge. CalPERS needs to get involved with this industry and get the product that can work for their members.
Michael Bilbrey?
Thank you. So long-term care, there's no denying, has been a difficult issue, but not just for CalPERS. It's an industry-wide issue that I have seen over several years now. I have seen these fluctuations in rates in different plans, not just in CalPERS, but across the industry. And so what we have in place, unfortunately at this point, has several versions now. I don't know if we've done an adequate job enough for members to understand how this system, how this long-term care process works. I've actually experienced it now firsthand on 2 occasions specifically. My grandmother and my aunt, her sister, both of them, I ended up being a caretaker for each of them. We didn't have long-term care. They were at a time where they didn't get that, and we didn't think about it. I was much younger, 12 years ago or so. So we had to help and take care of them at home. Now, the costs for this are so out of whack and astronomical for people all across the industry that we have to get it to a point that's more economical, that because people need this care. They need this in the ending times or not just at the end of life. It also is at times where people may need rehabilitation. They may have had an accident. There's a lot of critical points that come during this process, and we need to strengthen what we have so far but make sure that the members understand and participate in it. Thank you.
Margaret Brown?
Thank you. With respect to my earlier question where I didn't have the microphone on, I did want to add that I do want to see us provide more choices in the healthcare as well. I'm looking at PPO options. When you only have one option, it's kind of difficult. And so I'm open to look at that. It might be more work for staff, so it's more work for staff. But let's give the retirees and the employees the choices they need. With respect to long-term care and the cost, again, it's based on the risk pool. Who's in the pool? What is that risk? What do the actuaries say, and what is it going to cost? And I know our firm made a big mistake on calculating what that cost was going to be, and then they fixed it, and they said everybody has to pay. It's kind of like what we're doing to public agencies these days. We're short on the retirement, and here's what you got to pay, and everybody's up in arms. What we need to do is get younger people to invest in long-term care. I'm in my late 50s. I'd like to do it now, but it's a little late. I should have jumped in, you know, when I first started working at 28. And I think there are things we can do to market to the people who join in, are part of CalPERS, and get them into the pool to lower the overall cost. That's the only way we're going to do this, is to get the pool bigger and probably switch vendors. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Yeah, long-term care is a good program if you can leverage the numbers in CalPERS and have majority of them participate in it, young and old and everybody. And I think we can improve on it by attracting those young people and everybody to it, and expand the pool. And the main thing to attract people is make it clear what it will cover, and do the actuarial correctly so you know it will reflect the actual cost and it would not be a liability. And with that, if you can attract more people and make it clear what is it going to cover for them, and they participate, I think you can reduce the cost, and it's a win-win. At this point, it's a little bit questionable. It needs a lot of improvement, and I have to look at the analysis, look at the actuarial, look at a lot of other things to make a judgment on it. And before I make a decision, I will do that. Thank you.
Michael Flayerman.
So here's a story I think is kind of interesting, which is that at my very first meeting of CalPERS when I came on the board in 1995, I was sitting right there, and the staff, this may have happened in closed session, so I may be breaking the law by telling you about something that happened 22 years ago. I don't really remember. But the staff announced that the long-term care program, which had just started, that the administrator who we had hired had sold the contract. And it had been sold to a firm called United Healthcare. Nobody had ever heard of them in 1995, believe it or not. And I tell you that because that was an oops right out of the box, a serious oops. And I think what's significant about that, and I'll tie it back to this issue of secrecy in closed session, which is even the CIA has a process where secrets are eventually deemed to no longer have any value. CalPERS doesn't. If that happened in closed session, that was supposed to be a secret forever, right? And maybe things like that are some of the structural problems around decision making that keep causing oops like this to happen. And I think they need to be thought about. And I think one of the things that needs to be thought about is I think there needs to be a sunset on secrets.
This question, we begin with Michael Bilbrey. Do you think the CalPERS executive team is doing a good job? Would you try to convince other board members to dismiss the CEO, CIO, and chief actuary if the funding status of the system declines?
So, the CalPERS executive team, many of whom have not been in place for a very long time, have been doing a good job, yes. But there are issues I think we have within the ranks of under their various leadership. The board has jurisdiction over one employee, and that is the CEO, and the CEO then has jurisdiction over the staff. And so, as Chair of Performance and Compensation Talent Management Committee, we clearly have discussions with the CEO on concerns we have about various staff. We have seen some concerns in the investment area. There's no issue, that is an issue. I think that this coming up in our committee meetings, we'll be discussing further about some of those issues. But the staff currently, I do have confidence in, but I think some corrective measures that are done by the CEO will come to fruition, and I think we'll move the fund where we need it to go. And I think we also need to give people who have been in a position a short time adequate enough time to make sure they're trying to fulfill all the duties that they'd like to and their initiatives throughout the organization, and make sure they're doing that properly. And yes, if they're not doing the job they're supposed to be doing, then I would advocate that we take measures to move forward.
Margaret Brown.
the executive team is doing a bad job. They are more concerned with positive press than actually positive results. The CEO is new. She came from Washington. She has no college degrees, no undergrad, no AA, no master's, no PhD. And she's running our entire $330 billion fund. The CIO, who makes in excess of $500,000 a year, he's in charge of our investments. He doesn't have the investment experience. He is not qualified to do the job. But let me really talk about the person who upsets me, and that's the general counsel, Matt Jacobs. I was here at a board meeting in June where he told the CalPERS board they could not share articles of interest, articles of education about what's going on with investments or what's going on with healthcare. He said you can't share it, it's against open meeting laws. But at that very same time, they were sharing 50,000 articles on the internet, on their own private internet, violating copyright laws and intellectual property laws. CalPERS is going to be sued. They've turned the matter over to the Attorney General to defend them. So you've got your general counsel saying you can't send an article to each other, and instead they're sharing 50,000 copyrighted articles. Thank you.
Sam Maltawaji.
Yeah, CalPERS in general, they've been doing a good job over the long run. In recent years, they've been doing medium job, okay in certain area, bad in other areas. And the transparency, they are not being honest and open to the public in many decisions that they take, and there are a lot of potential improvement in doing a lot of these things. Hopefully, with electing 2 new members, we'll have some influence. The board is 13 members, so at least 2 out of 13 will have some influence, and we will do a better job to serve the interests of the members. And the main problem that I have with the CalPERS staff and board, there are a lot of misleading information about CalPERS that they don't fight it, they don't go and rebuttal it and put the facts to stop those accusations. But hopefully I'll be elected and I will make that change. Thank you.
Michael Flayerman.
Let me just start by amplifying what Margaret had to say about this copyright infringement. This has not really gotten pressed, but it's a big deal. CalPERS infringed more than 10,000 articles by publishing them on the web in a way that was public. This is going to end up costing the fund probably, I'm going to guess, $30 to $50 million. It will probably be the largest copyright infringement settlement in U.S. history. But I'm not going to get into personalities about the management structure, but there is something wrong with the management structure, which is that several years ago, the board gave up what it had always had, which was the authority to hire and fire the chief investment officer, and gave that authority to the CEO. Now, what doesn't make sense about that, in my opinion, very obviously, is the board going to fire the CEO if the investment performance is sufficiently bad? I don't think so. Because the CEO is not even by design intended to be an investment professional. How can you hold that person accountable for something that she's not involved in? It has the effect of taking clear lines of accountability away from the flow from the board to the staff. I really, really think that needs to be changed back to the way it was for decades prior to then.
David Miller.
Yeah, one thing I think you'll find all of us on common ground is the issue of transparency. And for me, when I first ran for the board the first time, it was back in the glory days of CalPERS when we had transparency issues with hiring executives. One of my campaign issues was hiring a fellow named Fred Buenrostro. The entire culture on the board in those glory days with people coming on the board, leaving the board, going to industry, coming back, doing all this stuff resulted in a lot of reforms at CalPERS to prevent the revolving door, to try to get more transparency. We want corporate governance in this country to improve. We want corporations to behave more transparently. It's that three-legged stool: transparency, accountability, and results. You got to have all three or you don't get any of them. And CalPERS, there's a lot of room for improvement. How they hire the CEO, looking at best practices for governance models to put the buck back where it should stop, which is the leadership, and that is the CalPERS board. The buck will stop here with me, but I'll be one member of a board. You've got to be able to work with that board to make changes, and looking at that governance structure and trying to reestablish transparency and look at best practices for governance. Does it make sense to only hire a CEO and have them delegate all your authority to them? Well, that needs to be looked at. The performance of the individual, they're new. That's going to take some time, but the whole process needs to be looked at.
Next question for Margaret Brown. What are your ideas for improving the performance of the investments? And do you believe that a certain percentage of our portfolio should be in private equities?
I think that, so the answer is to private equities, yes. I do think a certain percentage of our investments should be in private equity because they typically consistently bring in the highest returns. What the issue is with CalPERS is, what firms are we investing in? Who are the general partners? What do those agreements look like? And do we have any type of control? And the answer has been up till now, no, we do not have control. The general partners make the call for cash. They tell us what fees they pay. Maybe they don't tell us what fees we pay. But I would look at doing other things, look at growth in the third world economies, but also maybe look at co-investments. I sat at a board meeting in July in Monterey where they talked about starting a new type of investments where they're not accountable to CalPERS at all. They get $2 billion and they can go out and do whatever they want. That's wrong. I think we need to potentially bring private equity in-house, build the skills among our own very smart, talented staff, and bring PE inside and cut out all those fees. When you talk to investment experts, it looks like we could save between 2 to 5% and make more money that way. Thank you.
Sam Altawaji.
Yeah. In the recent years, there are some down in the market and some miscalculation and all of that. If you take it over the long run, they've been doing good, better than many other investment and so forth. Having said that, the private equity is a must of everything, whether you make it at 10% or 15 or 8%, that's a risk reward analysis. You have to go through it, you have to ask the question, you have to understand what it will entail. The way the investment, it should be diversified, of course. I think it's a good thing to take advantage of the market when real estate in California especially goes down. California, in the long run, always the real estate go up. I've seen it over so many years, and I invested in it, and it was rewarding. And as long as you know what you're doing, you evaluate it, you take all the pros and cons, and you do your best to evaluate the investment. I think there is opportunity to increase the real estate investment, diversify with everything else, and take advantage of the dips whenever possible. Thank you.
Michael Flaherty.
Yeah, I am in favor of investing in private equity when the investments are based on economic growth and business building on the part of the private equity manager. The challenge is that I think a lot of CalPERS private equity portfolio really is not based on that now, and instead is based on leverage and financial engineering. Now, how can you do better? I have substantial expertise. It's been the main area of my academic career, looking at how private equity managers take more money for themselves than they're really entitled to. And to tell you a story, about 3 years ago, I came to the senior leadership of the investment office, and I said to them, among other things, I said, you know, various of your private equity managers I've discovered are taking a form of kickback from the law firms they do business with, where they negotiate substantial discounts on the legal work that they themselves have to pay for, and then they pay what one firm describes as rack rate, or a premium to rack rate, when the investors have to pay. And it appears that CalPERS didn't do anything. They didn't go to them and say, "Hey, knock it off." And the reason I think that is because the SEC had to go in and fine those firms to get them to stop. And so there are obvious opportunities to get investment firms to knock it off, but you have to have the courage, which I think has really not been there in many cases, to be willing to sit across the table and tell them to stop.
David Miller.
Yeah, there's always going to be a role in the portfolio for private equity investments. The question is, what is the optimal mix when we look at that mix and try to determine where do we want to be for the long run, and making adjustments as we go. And I think this is an area where clearly there's opportunities for CalPERS to step up its game in terms of what we pay out in fees. The way we do it now, pretty much industry standard type fee arrangements. Well, CalPERS should be using its clout and its bargaining power. We should be asking real clearly, what are we getting in terms of value added from these middlemen in these processes? And that goes just as well for, pharmacy benefits managers. How much value are they really adding if our members are paying more for prescriptions? How much are these managers adding if our investments are not meeting the targets, or are meeting them only because we've lowered them and lowered our expectations? That's where CalPERS can really start to step up its game and negotiate a better deal based on its power in the marketplace.
Michael Bilbrey.
So thank you. So in looking at investments, there's 3 areas we look at as far as our fund goes. Are we diversified? Our funds have a diverse set of investments that are going to make sure that we are getting back to that rate of return. As I mentioned, the rate of loss. We have to look at the potential of loss and what those investments go. And of course, again, stating the rate of return. I don't think there's a fund that doesn't have private equity out there, or if there is, very few. Private equity is a major cornerstone of many, many funds, including ours. And so I think, yes, we have to be into private equity if we're going to be wanting to get the rate of return that so many of our members are asking for. But we also have brought much of investment in-house. We have actually saved several millions of dollars with that process, and we have more to go. We have a plan to get down past the 100 managers, which we've been working on for several years now. The whole discussion that we talked about at our outside out-of-town meetings regarding private equity is you need to have a very, very sophisticated staff involved. And we're quite not right there yet. But we also discussed about possibly one day getting to that point. And I've talked to so many trustees across the nation, and fees is a very common problem in every fund. And everybody at this point are trying to do something about that. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Did I answer you? Didn't I start the question?
Oh, you did, yes.
Oh.
You're, Sam, you're next.
I think you started.
Sam, this year, CalPERS paid out more in benefits than it took in contributions. How alarmed should the board and the membership be with this development?
again, it goes back to the rate of return, and we have to maximize that, and we have to work on that. I think they had made a lot of changes in the last 5-10 years. They reduced the discount rate a couple times, and they were working on smoothing the rate to public agency, which is a good practice. So eventually they will catch up with that, and also the life expectancy was changed. So all these factors are changing the ground rules, and right or wrong, I think what they did, smoothing it over multi-years, is a good thing, but eventually when they all combine together, changing and increasing the cost, that may happen at the beginning, and hopefully they have analysis, and I'm not privy to that, and we can look at it if I'm elected, and we will make the adjustment if need be, increase the rate and all of that. Right now, it's not. Most agencies are not 100% funded. I don't think you want to be 100% all the times, but a good range of 90% is good. But eventually, this is going to have to happen. Do a combination of increasing the rate of return, do better with the investment, increase temporarily the contribution, and hopefully in the long run we would reduce the contribution from public agencies and employee. Thanks.
Michael Flayerman.
Yeah, this is one of these the sky is falling. I'm sorry. This is one of these the sky is falling formulations that I find very perplexing for a couple of different reasons. One is I think it's not actually true. Yet it's said all the time. And the reason why I think it's not true is that this claim ignores the fact that the assets in the system generate considerable income every year, and that's being ignored when people say this. Now, we all play mental games in dealing with our finances. I have certain bank accounts I try to pretend I don't have, right, because I'm trying to manage my money without having to dip into them. But I don't think that's how a $340 billion pension system should be managed. And what's puzzling about it also is I've heard the CalPERS staff say this in board meetings, and I've heard the board say it. And this is playing right into the hands of the people who want to, as opponents of defined benefit pensions, portray the sky is falling. They're going to run out of money, right? Yeah, they're not going to run out of money, number one, because there's all this income that's being ignored. But second, there's also just a cognitive error here in the sense that if the pension system were a closed system, meaning no new employees, the whole actuarial goal is that when the last retiree dies, the system has no money left, right? So the idea that CalPERS is supposed to have ever more money is itself also false. So there are multiple respects in which this is just a false premise and a false formulation.
David Miller.
Yeah, the sky is not falling. Our defined benefit system is the best way to provide benefits and to fund those benefits that we've earned and deserve. We can do a better job with how we manage them, transparency, accountability, and results, again. But when our opponents spin these out in a way to use them to attack us, to try to convince everybody that, it's not sustainable, it's going to bring down government, it's going to crowd out public safety and everything else that you want from government, and it's going to raise your taxes. It's all nonsense. But if you start looking back at root cause for the kind of attacks we're under, when someone says, pension costs have gone up X 100,000%, well, when the employers behave irresponsibly, like the state of California did for about 6 to 8 years, where they took a holiday from putting in because we're on the boom side of the third big boom bust cycle before the big collapse that impacted everybody, and CalPERS did a great job navigating through that with as little losses as we took. That's where the real risk is, that those kind of attacks result in new hires being pushed into hybrids or 401ks and not providing the funds to maintain those benefits and our buying power protection and our COLAs. That's the real threat.
Michael Bilbrey.
Thank you. So there certainly is cause for us to make sure we're watching what is happening. It is clear and it is true that at one point, not so distant past, we had 2 members for every retiree. We are down to about 1.3, 1.5 members to every retiree. That is a slip. That is something as a board we must watch and make sure that we are preparing for what that outcome could be. But tomorrow we are not paying out every pension to every person in the state. And sometimes our members trying to figure that out and what they hear in the media and all, I try to help them in equating to something that's more relatable to them, and that is their home, their mortgage. They don't have their money, and probably the vast majority of our members do not have the money to put total cash down on their home. So they take out a 30-year mortgage. We but we plan for a 30-year retirement. Of course, many more people are living longer now, although that actuarial change just changed slightly, which is going to have a benefit to the system. But people are living longer, so we have to pay more of those. So we are not going to pay out that tomorrow, just like people are not going to pay for their entire home tomorrow. It's over a long-term period. The ALM process we are in right now is critical to make sure we get back. What the bottom line that we've talked about all day is getting back to full funding, and 100% must be the goal. 80, 90 by actuarial standards is considered good, but we must focus on 100%. Thank you.
Margaret Brown.
Well, it's glad to know the analysis is flawed. You couldn't tell that from what you read in the press. But regardless of whether the analysis is flawed, we are still underfunded. And one thing we can do again is to look at our investment strategies. But there's another thing our board and senior staff can do starting today. They can lead the way in belt tightening. If you are short in your budget, you cut back, you do without, or you find a cheaper way to achieve your goals. But our board and senior staff still continue to take extravagant trips, international trips, to destinations like Singapore and London, South Africa, Paris, and we're paying for that. We are paying for that. And if we are not paying for that, if investment companies or management firms are paying for that, what influence are they getting that we actually don't have? You can actually check the records. It's online. You have to download it and sort it, but you can see that senior staff paid $8,000 for a round-trip ticket to London. We all paid for that. Another staff member paid $15,000 for a round-trip flight to Hong Kong. And I'm sure it was all work. I'm sure it was all work. Tighten the belt, control operating costs, and let's show that we're in this with all the members. Thank you.
And we've come to the time for closing statements. We do have a question, candidates, about what committee, if elected, you would want to serve on. And if you have your full 2 minutes if you want to use them for closing statements, but if you have time, you could include what committee you'd like to serve on. And in reverse order, we begin closing statements with Sam Altawaji.
Thank you for organizing this forum to allow us to share our views with you, and thank you for to the League of Women Voters to moderate it. Appreciate it. Together we can restore the public trust in our pension plan and protect our hard-earned benefit from any political attack. I am not a politician. And have no political agenda. I retired and I'm trying to help the system. My goal is to represent you on the board, to devote my time as a retiree to protect the benefit that we all work so hard for during our tenure in serving the public at large. It is my belief that no full-time employee can devote sufficient time to address the challenges facing CalPERS administration. And for that reason, I'm asking you to vote during this election to elect me, Sam Altuagi, who has the time, the devotion, the experience to represent you on the CalPERS of administration. And thank you in advance for your vote and consideration. Thank you.
Margaret Brown?
Thank you. Since we're all on the investment committee, I'll say the investment committee. I would love to be on the compensation and talent committee. I don't see that forthcoming. I'll take healthcare and benefit committee. I think I can do a lot of good there. I also want to, I was rethinking some of my answers, and I wanted to be sure that I say that climate change is real, the science is real. If I did not say that, I'm saying it now. I believe that the CalPERS governance is a train wreck by virtue of the board ceding its power to staff and then engaging in oversight theater as opposed to real oversight. We need transparency and real oversight, and that only happens with change. You know, my father, who was a letter carrier and shop steward, drilled into his children, when something is wrong, you have two choices: do nothing or do something. And if you do nothing, you don't get to complain. You don't get to complain. But if you do something, you actually can make a difference. I choose to do something and help our pension system, and I hope you agree. Thank you.
Michael Bilbrey?
Thank you. So I have, since my tenure on the board, have served on all committees of the CalPERS board and currently sit as the chair of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee, as well as vice chair of the Pension and Health Benefits Committee. But no matter what committee I've sat on, I have enjoyed working on every single one of them and happy to serve in any capacity that the president sees fit for us. I want to thank the over 9,800 members and active retirees who signed my petitions to get me back on the ballot once again. I want to thank the League for having this today and for all of you for showing up and being engaged in this process. No matter who you vote for, I ask each and every CalPERS active member and retiree to participate in the process. You must make your voice be heard, and that is through voting. And we have offered so many new ways this year, 2 new ways to make it easier than ever. I've been told that I am a low-key guy and that I'm kind of quiet at times, and that is true. But I'm a calm, steadfast, thoughtful, and professional board member as well. And I make sure that when I speak, it's to make a difference, and that people actually listen to what I have to say. And that's what has happened. I don't wait month to month to get to an issue or resolve an issue. I try to take care of that issue as it comes up. I don't need to wait till the next board meeting. I don't want to wait till the next board meeting to talk to someone. I do it as each issue comes up. I want to continue to make sure that we protect the members' process to voice concerns and continue to engage with myself, with all of the board, with staff, and I'm here to make sure that takes place and continue that work. I want members who have heard much here today that might have questions of me by some of the statements made to feel free to phone me, to call me, 818-502-3869, or email me at bilbrey4calpers2017@gmail.com. The key word here today is improvement. Nothing is perfect. We can always improve. Thank you.
Okay, reversing order for position A, we'll begin with Michael Flayerman.
Yeah, wouldn't it be David? I started.
I know, so I'm just.
Okay, I'm happy to do either way.
Okay.
As I've alluded to in my various remarks, I've had a significant role at CalPERS behind the scenes over the last several years. I've had a lot of interactions with the investment staff, and I've also had interactions with the board. Some of those things have been telling them how investment managers pick them off. Other things have been pointing out some of their behavior, which is in some ways not conforming with the law. There was this issue of not producing a proper investment transaction report. I had to confront them about the fact that they were illegally imposing a limit on public comment of 3 minutes, and they eventually had to acquiesce to the reality that that was correct, that they were not acting legally. So there's a lot that's happened. I've also played a significant role with Mr. Jelensik, who's been very public about it, but behind the scenes, in having pushed CalPERS to disclose billions of dollars in fees that it has paid to investment managers over the last decades, which really raises questions of how did this ever happen, that there were billions of dollars in off-the-books payments that were made. And then the last thing, to address the question about what committees I would like to be on. When I was on the board before, I was on every committee at the same time other than one, and I was actively employed then. Now I'm retired, so to speak, so I guess I would like to be on all the committees. And I would close by saying, on the subject of what committees would you like to be on, Mr. Jelensik told me early this year that he had been removed from most of the committees that he was on, which was clearly some kind of punishment for him being not playing ball with the rest of the board, and that power is wrong. The president of the board should not be using committee assignments to make some members of the board less equal than others members of the board. I don't think anybody here stands for that.
David Miller?
Yeah, well, first, as far as committees, naturally, as someone with a graduate degree and a lifelong interest in economics and finance as it applies to business administration, I'm interested in investments, investment policy. That committee would be a good fit for me. But I'm also a nationally recognized expert in performance management in the healthcare and long-term care arena. And so I bring a lot of strength there. But ultimately, as a member of a board, I've got to be able to work with my colleagues on the board to be effective for the people that vote for me and elect me. And so I have a lot to learn as a new board member, and will work with my colleagues to figure out where is the best place, where can I contribute the most, where can I work with them to get things done. So again, thanks to CalPERS and the League of Women Voters for hosting. Thanks again to John Chang, Betty Yee, Michael Bilbrey, other leaders who've endorsed me, and to all of the public employee unions, to the Cal State retirees, others that have endorsed me. These folks have looked at this. I value their endorsement and support, and there's a reason that I've got their endorsements, and I don't know the answer, but I would be shocked and amazed if my opponent has the endorsement of a single union, labor organization, or statewide elected official, and that speaks volumes. I want to be on this board to ensure your defined benefit pension is there when you retire fully, and is that you have access to the benefits you've earned, and a seat on this board should be there to do that, to put members' interests first. For the last 15 years, that's what I've done. For the last 30 years, as a rank and file union member, a union officer, a union president, as a member of truth squads fighting to get the word out that our system is sustainable, that's what I've done, not left public service and gone off to the private sector to make money for myself, which, sounds attractive sometimes, but I'm here for you, not for me.
That concludes our forum. I'd like to thank the candidates very much for participating. Thank all the CalPERS staff who worked hard on this, and the League of Women Voters volunteers, and especially thank you, all the voters here in the room and those online. We hope the insights that you gain from this forum will aid you in making your decision. And remind you that ballots were mailed last week. They look like this in case you set it aside. Inside, you'll find a great little pamphlet that has all the candidate statements and everything you need to know about casting your vote. You can cast it online, by phone, or by mail, postage paid. The deadline for voting is October 2nd. Thank you and good afternoon.